In this video, we're going to validate an email address. I was recently working on a system that was connecting to an API from another system, and that had 60,000 users. I would have thought that that system would have had something in place to validate the email address of the people, of the users that it collected, but it didn't. We had a lot of email addresses that were at Gmail. Instead of .com, it was .com. We had a lot of email addresses that were just malformatted and had special characters in there that shouldn't have been in there. We had email addresses that just absolutely didn't exist. We would have something like at hotmail.com. Instead of Hotmail, it would be Hotmail, and there'd be HOTMALL.com, which could be a domain, but I don't think it is. So there was a lot of email addresses that were not formatted correctly and just not actual email addresses. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to make a video showing you guys how I validate emails in any of the systems that I build, and I had to build it to validate these 60,000 users and the email addresses that came with it. So let's just jump right into it. Here on the ideapro.io website, we have just this page we created, email.php. So in our code, we have just created this email.php in the root directory of the domain. Now, you don't have to use WordPress for these type of functions. I use WordPress a lot because that's what our customers want. And WordPress provides a lot of pre-built functions that we don't have to build out ourselves. Now, if you want me to do a video of building out these functions, each individual piece, then I can. But for the most part, we use WordPress, and we use WordPress for that reason, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel on all these different functions that are pre-built into WordPress. Now, there's two functions that are built into WordPress, and there's email. So that's one function, and then the other function is sanitize email. Whoops. So at first glance, if you look at the WordPress codex and go through each one of those functions, they look like they do the same thing. And for the most part, they do. The difference is sanitize email removes special characters from the email address. Email doesn't remove special characters. It just returns a true or false if that email is a true, valid email or not. Now, this isn't the final straw of validating an email. This just says that it sanitizes the email, takes out any special characters. Email says whether it's correct formatted email or not. In this video, I want to go over the next step too, which is validating with DNS, with a check DNS, to see if that email or if that domain actually has valid MX records. If it has valid MX records, then you can kind of say, okay, this email is valid. The next step would be sending an email to that user and having them validate that email somehow or another. Either it's a code you send to them that they have to type in, or it's a link that they have to click to validate their email. We're not going to get into that part. We're just going to see if the email address is valid, and if it is, we're going to continue. And if it's not, we're going to send it back to the user, or in my case, like a lot of times what I do is I get a lot of spam on websites. So I have a form on the website. Someone fills out the form to contact us. Even with reCAPTCHA, even with the newest version of reCAPTCHA, with all the stuff that reCAPTCHA offers, spam still gets through. So I validate the email address and then sometimes just say, thank you for your submission. And that submission really doesn't go anywhere. it just kind of gets lost in space. Actually, I don't even accept it. I just say thank you for your submission to make them think that they did it. But if it's a valid email address, of course it comes through to us. So we're going to show you guys kind of what we do to validate an email address, and I'm making it super simple by having it on this page here. You could do this in a plugin or in a theme, like a themes functions.php file, or you could build a plugin that, that captures that and validates it. So, all right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a variable called email, and in this variable we're going to put in tim@gmail.com just as an example. All right. And then here, and like I said, we're doing this as simple as possible. Typically you would do this this would be the success page or something like that, or success file that when someone submits a form, it captures this information. But I just want to make it super simple for you guys here on this page. Now, if we're going to bring in any WordPress functions, we need to bring in the WordPress core, right? So up here at the top, we're going to do a require once, and that's going to be wp load.php. And the reason why we can do wp load.php not in any directory is because we put this file in the root of the website where WordPress actually sets. So if your WordPress isn't in the root and you're putting this file in the root, you need to direct that to the directory of your WP load file. Now, by doing that, we've brought in all the functions of WordPress. So now we can start working with this email here. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to sanitize that email, but we're going to run it through a function. Okay. So we're going to come up here just above this, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to write a function, and we're going to call it my email validation, right? All right. So we're putting this function file right on the page. You can put it in a functions file and then run the function outside of the file. You can do it in a plugin, or like I said, the themes functions folder. I'm doing it just as simple as possible to show you guys here. Okay. So then in here, we're going to say $email. All right. So inside of this function, we're going to collect this email address here and then do something. The first thing in this function that we want to do is we want to check if it's an email address. So we can say if is email, and now we can do something from there, right? Else return false, right? So if it's not an email address, we're going to return false. And that basically means from that point we can send the user back to the form so that they can fix that email address, or just cancel what's happening here. Okay, so here in the is email, it says, okay, this is an email, but we have to put in here email, is email. And if it is an email, then now we can continue, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say email, sanitize email. So we're going to strip out any special characters that the email address has. Now, the reason why we do that is because as someone's typing, they could have typed in tim@gmail.com and then hit that, hit a single quote, before we'll put this in double quotes. They could have hit a single quote as they hit enter, because it's right next to the enter key. So if they did that, the sanitize email would remove that special character. So if they put any other special characters in there, it would also remove those characters as well. So hopefully, if sanitize email, now it's corrected that email address. Okay, so now that we've said is email, and the email from WordPress Codex says the email is a valid email address. Now we've sanitized the email address. Now we're actually going to check the DNS MX records to see if there's valid MX records. First thing we need to do is we need to explode the domain. And what we're going to do is we're going to separate the domain. So after the @ we're going to separate that from the email address. We're going to say domain exp for explode, and we're going to explode. And the first variable in this explode function is going to be what we're exploding it by. So we're going to put the @ symbol, and then we're going to put in the variable of what we're exploding, and we're exploding the email. So now what that's done is it's created an array of the variable from email, and that first variable is going to be everything before the @ sign, and then the domain is going to be everything after the @ sign. So the array key of 0 is going to be everything before the @ sign, which is hopefully someone's name. In this example, it would be Tim, and then the array key 1 would be everything after the @ sign, which would be gmail.com. Okay, so now we can say if is set domain exp, and we're going to look for the the value or key of 1. If is set key of 1, else we're going to return false. Now that shouldn't really happen because here we've already said is email, and then we've sanitized the email. Both of those functions will look for an @ sign and then stuff behind the @ sign. So we shouldn't get to this point where one doesn't exist here, because the explode function should explode that string, that email string, and have the domain after it. But we just put this in here just in case, okay? All right, so here now we've gotten to the point where it says, okay, that does exist, the domain does exist, and so that domain is going to equal domain exp 1. So now we have our domain name. So now we're going to run a PHP function that will check the DNS of that domain name. All right. So we're going to say if, and then we're going to exclamation point, which means not, check DNSRR. Okay. Of the domain. So this first variable is the domain that we've chosen here. That what we're going to check is the MX record. Okay. Then we're going to open that if statement there, and then else we're going to return true. And why we're doing that is because we're saying if it's false, if it doesn't have a DNS record for the MX record, then we're going to do this here. Else return true. Now we can do just say return false. Okay. All right. So now what we've done is we've checked the DNS for the MX record, and if it returns that it doesn't have MX value or doesn't have values for the MX record, it's going to return false. If it does have MX values, it's going to return true. Now, again, this isn't checking their actual email address to see if it's a real email address, right? Like john@xyz.com might be jonathan@xyz.com, and even if you're emailing to John, Jonathan's probably not going to get it. We're not validating that. That is something that you can do by sending an email, like I said before, but we're not going to get into that on this video. Okay, so now this is the simple function that we've written to validate and check for that email address. Okay, so now what we want to do is we've got this email down here, and the email is tim@gmail.com, and now we want to come down here and say if, and then we're going to call in this function, my email validation, if my email validation $email, else, now it's going to, so if this returns true, then we can continue and email looks good. Else, this is going to return that it's a bad email address. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to say echo email looks good. Echo your email is invalid, right? Okay, so from there we can continue on the process of accepting their form submission and enter that into the database and do whatever else we need to do on the form submission, or we here we will return them, possibly return them back to the form. Okay, all right, so now we're going to save this and we're going to go over here and we're going to refresh this page and it says email looks good. So it's saying that because tim@gmail.com looks like a valid email address. Not necessarily that it is an actual email address that exists, but gmail.com is a valid domain with MX values. Tim is the name of the guy that owns the email address, but that may not be valid. Okay, so if we add this little hyphen here, I mean not hyphen, a comma here in return, it's going to say your email is invalid. Now, the reason why it says that is because it's immediately checking right here and saying is email. And you want to do that so that it throws it back to the user so they can go, ooh, what did I do wrong? And they can fix that email address, okay? If you don't do that and you just sanitize the email address, you may take out a character that they didn't mean to put in, but they meant to put in a different character. Let's say they went in to put in, you know, they think capitals in their email address makes a difference, and they wanted to do a Shift R for their last name or something, or Robert Shift R, and they accidentally hit the %sign, right? And so it takes out that %sign but doesn't put in the R that they wanted. So the best thing to do is the first is to email, send it back to them and say there's something wrong. Then they can fix that email and go, oh, I didn't mean to put that in there. Come back, save, come back over here and refresh, and it says every email looks good. Now, if we come in and we do gmails.com, we can save that and we come back over here and refresh the page and it says your email is invalid. Now, that went all the way through to checking the MX records of the domain, and I'll show you. Let's go back up here to our function and we're going to just put in something in each one of these steps so that we can see what it's actually doing. So this if is email is going to check, and then down here, if it's not an email address, we're going to do echo, let's say did not pass is email function, right? Okay, now it did pass email, so now we're going to come in here and we're going to capture this stuff. So this says is if set. Again, we should not run into that at all. We shouldn't get to this at all. So this section really should never happen, right? So we shouldn't get to that because is email should catch it not having an @ symbol in the domain, okay? So here we're going to say check DNS. We're going to say echo DNS check failed, right? And so then return here, we're going to say DNS check passed, okay? That way we can see in the process where it fails or passes, okay? So we still have @gmails.com here in the email address. So we're going to come over here, we're going to refresh the page, and it says DNS check failed. So let's put I'm gonna add a break after each one of these so we can see. I know some of these don't really matter, but we're gonna do it anyway, just for the fun of it. Whoops, there we go. So here, okay. So now we're gonna come over here and refresh. Now it says DNS check failed, your email is invalid. All right, so if we come back down here, we take out gmail.com and we put in that single quote again, and we refresh. Now it said did not pass is email function. Okay, so now we're going to take this out and we're going to refresh, and DNS check passed, email looks good. Now if we say Tim is the greatest, we're going to refresh and it says DNS check passed. So let's return the email address. Let's return email. Let's do this up here. Let's say echo email. We just want to print out the email address so you guys can see it. So return, so Tim is the greatest at gmail.com. Tim.is.the.greatest@gmail.com. So from our system, it looks like that's a valid email address. Now, I don't think anyone has that many periods in their email address, but they might. And so the only other way to validate that would be to send them an email, like I said before, and get them to validate it from there. I hope this video helped you guys validate email addresses. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like this video. I want to know your guys' process on how you validate emails, and if you've ran into any other issues that maybe I didn't mention in this video. Again, I was using WordPress for this, but I can make a video that extends out farther if I need to, that doesn't use the WordPress functions to help validate emails. I really appreciate everyone that has subscribed, commented on the videos. I look forward to making a lot more videos, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks.